Hello, Brad here, just to say we're super proud that the Friday 5pm podcast is sponsored by the Malt Miller, the UK's best home brew store.
We use the Malt Miller for all of our homebrew experiments, as well as tapping them up for advice and binging on their awesome YouTube channel all the time.
That's why whenever we release a homebrew video, we put a recipe kit live on the Malt Miller, so you can brew with the exact same amazing ingredients that we did. The same ingredients used by pro brewers.
So alongside the Malt Miller's nitro-flushed hops, cold-stored yeast and milled-to-order malts, you can pick up recipe kits for our 5 Points Best Bitter, Russian River West Coast IPA, and now the fastest beer in the world, a hazy session IPA that goes from grain to glass in less than 48 hours.
Sign up to their newsletter at tinyurl.com/Malt Miller to get 5% off your first order. With the Malt Miller's amazing customer service and Johnny's 48-hour recipe, you could order the ingredients on a Monday and be drinking the beer by the weekend.
Speaking of which, it's Friday.
It's 5pm.
So enjoy this week's Friday 5pm podcast. Happy New Year, Beagie. Oh my God, I can't. This is take 2 and I still can't see.
It's that 50 pages of document.
I can't, yeah.
Smashed your brain.
Maybe we'll get into the 50 pages of documents that have addled my brain. Let's just say that 2021 hasn't started in the way that we all expected. There's insurrection in the States. There's me unable to say Happy New Year, beer, geeks. And I've been reading an 80-page government consultation on taxation of small brewers. Bradley, how are you?
Yeah, mate. Apart from the world being in an even possibly worse state of collapse than it was a couple of days ago in the previous year, I'm doing all right. Mate. I'm just sort of trying to not panic, basically, and sort of trying to just live my life via the internet, I suppose, like the rest of the world is right now. That's
a dangerous approach to trying to be happier.
Well, I've gone down all sorts of various wormholes, mainly due to the Washington riot and sort of looking into what the fuck QAnon is and all this sort of crazy shit that these people are spouting about. And Jamiroquai Man, who is either potentially an actor or an anarchist or a QAnon freak. So yeah, I've been looking into all of that kind of stuff. Mate, it was such a strange. I thought, how this is not going to get any worse than 2020, but mate, 2021, I don't know.
I think it all went wrong when in our first video of the year, despite my mistake at the start of 2020, I said things can only get better. So I'm pretty sure I'm patient zero for all the shit that's happening.
You've put some sort of curse on us digitally. The whole planet, Johnny. It's all your fault.
I've got to be honest, I sold the planet's soul in return for 100,000 subscribers.
Oh my God, you did a deal with the devil, did you? Is that what it is?
I did. I was at the crossroads and he came down and I said, look, I don't want it to be profitable, but I'll take 100,000 subscribers in return for you just letting it all go.
Decimating, unleashing plagues upon the earth. We better stop all this talk, mate, because we're going to get that Satanist bloke on our arse again.
Oh, yeah. I'm not wearing that T-shirt that has the Masons logo on it.
Yeah.
But I guess in the podcast he wouldn't know anyway. But yes, let's talk about the positives. 100,000 subscribers. We hit it on Christmas Eve.
Hey!
Which is... it was a wonderful Christmas present. And given that none of my Christmas presents arrived, that was real nice.
Oh, dude. So have you haven't had any Christmas presents?
Oh, well, I did from my wife and from my brother, who managed to cycle round with his gifts for us, but otherwise not really, no.
Oh, mate. What's Christmas without the presents?
Well, you see, to me, it's all about the food and the drink.
Exactly. It is. It's all about the love, and it's all about the people you're with.
Oh, and the love, yeah.
Which you weren't allowed to be with, but, you did still, you had the love. You got a wife, mate. You've got your bro nearby, so it's all good.
It was still good. Yeah,
it's it's a weird one for everyone, obviously, out there. I just hope everyone was all right. I mean, for me personally, Christmas is a sad time of year because I've lost my dad, so it always makes me upset at Christmas. But I think a lot of people out there struggle at this time of year. So hopefully the fact we've made it through it. We're in January, and the days are getting longer again, and hopefully the sun
days
is
do
getting,
feel pretty long. I'm not lying.
Yeah, the sun's getting a bit brighter, and hopefully we'll all get a little bit more vitamin D and start to feel a bit more positive. Hopefully.
There you go. That's as much positivity as we can muster. So what did you do with your Christmas? I clung to lots of traditions, even though it was my first Christmas, without my family, which involved lots of saison Dupont, the biggest roast I could possibly stomach. My Christmas homebrew, which we brewed 20 litres of New England Pale Ale that was supposed to be shared.
How much did you get through?
Was just consumed. We almost finished it.
Fuck off! Really?
Yeah.
Did you have it in an IV overnight or something? How'd you get through that?
Because it was ready early December.
Right.
So we were drinking it for a couple of weeks, and we're down to we've got about 3 litres left, I think.
Wow. Good effort.
We'll get into why that 3 litres isn't decreasing any further in a little bit. But yeah, tell me about your Christmas.
Yeah, much the same. Like normally I'd be spending it with my family and friends, and normally I've got a tradition where before Christmas I'd go to the pub with my old school friends, try and fit in at least a couple of pub sessions, old man boozers around Beckenham Way where I grew up, but obviously none of that this year. But we are, me and my girlfriend are in a support bubble with her best friend who's single, so we shared Christmas Day together, and he's an amazing cook, Tommy. So we had some amazing food and lots of great beers. He's Irish, and he brought over some Irish beers for me to try from Kinniger, who I'd never heard of before, but they were pretty good, man.
Kinniger Brewing.
Yeah.
I've been very near to the brewery when I went over to see White Hag and had some of their beers.
Yeah, they were enjoyable. Like I was telling them about White Hag and our sort of hopes and aspirations to get over there, and maybe record some Irish content if we're allowed to travel again. Tommy was coming at it from quite a funny angle that him and his brother had sent me this big box of Kinniger beers that they wanted me to post about on social media. On the channel, so they could then get free beers in a very sort of Irish way. They were trying to.
It's a good angle.
Tommy had told his brother that I was a big beer influencer and that I could get him free beers if he sent me over this box, which I loved. So yeah,
I'm sure you did nothing to quell that idea.
No, of course not. So thanks, Toby. Thanks for the massive amount of beer. But yeah, pretty good, man. Like drank some other beers. I talked before about my street beer drinking in Deptford.
Yeah, you've gone full 18-year-old again.
Yeah. Just going to Hot Burns Black, which is it's great. That's remained open the whole time, and to be honest, when I go there, I usually get Augustina Hells and just drink some of that because it's just a great cold beer to drink on a cold street. That's it.
Yeah, it's the way that the Germans do it as well. When you're in Berlin and in Munich and you're on public transport, lots of people are sat there drinking Augustina Helles. So it's a traditional way of consuming great German lager.
Yeah, street drinking, like in a non-threatening, anti what's the word? Social manner. Yeah, no like screaming and shouting and whatnot. But
I don't know. I've been drinking with you enough to know that when you've had a couple, you do get quite shouty.
Well, it's been known. Yeah, man. But I enjoyed that, and also I got to watch Mandalorian season 2. So that was my highlight, really, Mandalorian, mate. And it sent me down some other internet wormholes, which I'd like to send you guys down as well. So I might include some of those in the show notes. But basically, Mandalorian theme tune. The Mandalorian is like Wild West. It's like cowboys in space that are samurais and a sort of tale of a samurai, sort of lone warrior. It's fucking epic, mate. And I've gone down wormholes of just watching the Mandalorian theme tune, but many different interpretations of it, which are very satisfying to me. So there's a great metal version by a guy called Artificial Fear, which is just really crunchy metal. That's fucking sounds sweet. There's an 80s synthwave version that's just sounds like super smooth. There's one with this kind of crazy band of people that have got weird instruments, sort of like funny kind of oriental looking instruments, giant bass flute, not flutes, like a giant recorder, some bottles in the background. That one's great. There's an 8-bit kind of video game version. There's a brass band version. There's a version on a cello, which is a one guy that's recorded himself a couple of times playing all the different parts of the tune on cello. So he's plucking it. He's doing some like funky bass lines. He's doing the sort of violin kind of string stuff, all on a cello. Incredibly impressive. And then that sent me looking at a band called Galactic Empire, who are a sort of heavy metal band that dress up in full Star Wars regalia. And there's a great video on YouTube, which is they're performing the Imperial March, and it starts off with Darth Vader, and he puts his arm out and force moves the guitar into his hands, and then he just starts shredding. So, mate, I've just been loving the Star Wars YouTube nonsense. It's been brilliant.
It's a wonderful side effect of these, really deep, really. Well, it's not a cult because it's everywhere, but people who are so in love with a particular thing, the amount of incredible creativity you get off the back of these obsessions, around things like Star Wars, Harry Potter, stuff like that. There's, almost greater than some of the creative output of the actual original comes out of it with the number of people doing it.
Yes.
I also watched The Mandalorian over Christmas. I thought it was good. I didn't. I despite being a big Star Wars fan, didn't think it was brilliant. I find the writing, like the script, incredibly clunky. There's some really poor dialogue going on where you just listen to it going, it doesn't even make sense. Why would you say that in response to that? But as an adventure, it's pretty unrivaled, and it's great to have Star Wars content that isn't just a rehash of the original Star Wars content, which is what the last 3 films were.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, mate, the last 3 films, the horrible preceding 3 films before that in the early 2000s, for me, it's the best thing they've done apart from Rogue One.
Yeah, I think Rogue One is the peak since the first 3 films.
Great.
By a long way.
It's great, man. But anyway, this is a beer podcast, right?
Oh, it was. We're now 15 minutes in without, I think we've mentioned beer once. So, yeah, let's get back on it by announcing the fact that I'm not drinking.
What? No, I'm pretending I don't know. I do know Johnny's not drinking. Johnny, why aren't you drinking, mate? You're our glorious leader. I need to follow you into paths of drunken glory.
Well, I mean, there's lots of reasons for it. I've got to be honest. One of them is just to see what it's like. I've not taken more than probably 4 days off alcohol since 2013, is my estimation.
Bloody hell.
So I thought it would be interesting to see what would happen to my body in the name of science. So I had my last drink, which was a beautiful bottle of cider at midnight on New Year's Eve. And since then, I've only been drinking low alcohol beer and loads more water.
Wowza.
I've been so thirsty. So it turns out that most of my liquid intake has indeed been beer.
Having spent an incredibly long and intense amount of time with you on various trips that we've been very fortunate to travel around the world with beer, Johnny. Having shared a room with you, I can say that you drink probably less water than a camel. So I'm not surprised by that. I think I've only ever witnessed you drink a glass of water maybe once. You seem to run off of coffee and beer. So, I mean, I drink loads of water, which is why I've got such fabulous skin, Johnny. But
is that right?
I don't know why you've got fabulous skin. It must be all the water content of the beer, like you're saying. But hey, look, I'm glad. Do you feel better for it, or I mean, well, I suppose Do you want to tell everyone why we're doing this? Or do you want to keep that a bit of a...
Yeah. So we're doing it. So I'm writing lots of articles about it, but also it's a scientific experiment for myself. I think it's good to take a little break and just check that you're drinking for the right reasons, like not because your body needs it, but because you want to. So I wanted to check on that. But also we are doing a video on it. So Brad and I have talked lots. We've had lots of people on the channel ask for more content around low alcohol. And we were like, we can do more of that. And we did one last January with Brewdog. But really, just tasting them and going, hey, actually, those are pretty good, isn't particularly compelling content and isn't particularly accurate, because these low alcohol beers are designed to be drunk, in volume. They're designed to, replace, not top up the amount of full strength alcohol that we drink. So I decided that the best way to do some content around low alcohol was to go alcohol free for January, and see what happens to my body, to taste all the beers, and I'll review some beers sort of as we go through it. But mostly it's going to be a sort of a super size me journey as I learn, why I drink, what I drink, what's available if you don't want to drink, and the effect that alcohol has. And so far, I've got to be honest, the differences that I've felt have been really unexpected. So I thought I would feel a lot less tired. I thought I'd have more appetite. I thought I'd have more energy to sort of do physical exercise and stuff. None of that has changed. What has changed is I find it impossible to get to sleep, but then sleep so much better.
Oh.
So I lie there like wide awake for longer, but then I sleep really well. I have the most fucking bizarre dreams.
Wow.
Which I think is down to drinking. Drinking, I think, interrupts your cycle and stops you going into REM for as long, which is when you mostly dream. So now that I'm not drinking, I'm spending more time in REM, I'm dreaming more, and I'm remembering more of them. The most compelling dream so far has been me, as a child, queuing for the public loos on a beach.
Wow.
That's it. That's all that happened.
So were you levitating when you were queuing, or anything?
No, it was fun? The most mundane thing.
Johnny,
I never dream. So
can you up your dream game, mate? We need some more wild shit. Could you fire lasers out of your eyes at the other people queuing? Maybe.
Well, I mean, maybe people could sort of try and instill these ideas in my brain, and I'll read them all just before I go to sleep and see if we can affect my dreams.
Yeah, dreams are interesting. I don't really remember a lot of my dreams, which makes me sad. But sometimes I do, and they're almost like I'm, you're almost like in a different reality or something. I think they're really interesting, and I don't know. Like, there's a lot of scientists talk about us and the universe maybe being a projection or a simulation, which I find very interesting. That we might actually just be living in a simulation that's being run by an extremely advanced artificial intelligence, or a kind of extremely advanced civilization that are running an ancestor simulation that we're all part of. So I think about these kind of things, man. And like,
if you've not come across Science-ish, which is an amazing podcast run by a very legit and very interesting scientist, and also a former T4 presenter. It's a brilliant podcast, and they do episodes based on basically sort of scientific concepts from fiction. So they did an episode, it might have even been about the Matrix, like, are we living in a simulation? And they talk to experts about it and talk around it. And the episode that they do on Are We Living in a Simulation is absolutely brilliant.
Cool.
They also do a great one around Her, the film, about whether, what love is and whether we could ever love a machine and stuff like that. It's a bloody good podcast, much better than this one. So if you, like me and Brad, are obsessed with those kind of concepts, then definitely give Science-ish a listen. Should we move on to this week's video? Because we're already at 21 minutes, Brad.
Let's do it.
So this week's video was one of our main traditions, which is at the start of every year we do what we call our Big In video, where we look at the big trends and the big, mostly British breweries that we think will have an impact either critically or volume-wise in 2021. And this episode, it was filmed back in December. and we picked the amazing New Barnes from Scotland, Overtone from Scotland, and then Beak from down in southern England, and Utopian, who are from Devon, I think, and talked about what we think will be the big trends, which are Bohemian style lagers, so decocted, big heady pilsners, table beer and low alcohol, then more savoury hop aromas, like I think people trying to play around with New England IPA and also bring back the idea of bitterness to the IPA, and then hopefully, and this is more of a plea than it was a trend, sort of plain imperial stouts and malt forward, malt driven styles, which we've already seen through like the rise of bitters, milds, and of course, big imperial stouts. The comments, of course, were alive. It's a video that's done really, really well. Really pleased with that. But the comments are alive with controversy. People either agreeing or denying. Did you pick a favourite comment, Bradders?
I sure did. Mainly because I thought it got me a little bit outside of the bubble and maybe our expectations of what we think in the country that we're in. How we are maybe insular in how we view everyone else and their beer experience. So it was a comment from Harlot Hello, and he said, "I don't know what the trends would be, but I sure hope New England IPA trend is going to continue to grow here in Russia. 2020 was probably the first year when enjoyable and quality New Englands started to pop up. Wish brewers would upgrade their skills with this beer style because it's truly amazing." So I thought that was pretty interesting because obviously we've been living in a kind of beer culture where New England has been dominant force for quite a few years now.
Deep in the haze for years, yeah.
Yeah, so, I thought, well, fucking hell. I think we just assume that as it's here, it's predominant everywhere. But it's almost like that thing where, I don't know, you grew up sort of in the countryside, didn't you? But I grew up in London. And as a kid, when you're like looking at fashion and stuff, and you'd be living in London, and I always sort of held my own kind of school of fashion that I was into, but I would take note of what the fashion was at the time. And when you would go out into the countryside, you'd see people wearing stuff that looks, like fucking shell suits or something. You'd be like, who's wearing shell suits anymore? Because it was like 3 years ago people were wearing shell suits. So it's almost like that thing where, culture takes a while to disseminate and wheedle its way out of certain parts of the world, almost like a virus, really. Like we're living through a pandemic at the moment. A beer pandemic would be like New England IPA that's slowly the web is spreading.
You're calling the hazy IPA an epidemic?
Yeah, it's a haze. It's like a fog that's spreading around the world.
Yeah, I mean, so that started. It's worth remembering that hazy IPA using English yeast and heavy doses of American hops started in like 2003 or 4 or 5 with The Alchemist in New England. And it took a decade to spread out of New England. It then took 5 years to spread out to the UK. So that started happening in about 2015, 2016. And it makes a lot of sense that it would take longer to get out to Russia. And, I think probably in China, there definitely will be lots of New England IPA. But when I was there in 2016, I think it was, I went out there. Went to Beijing and to Qingdao. There was no hazy IPA that I remember.
No.
There were lots of. I remember drinking lots of Saison and West Coast IPAs in the craft breweries out there, but nothing particularly hazy. So it's definitely a little bit of a wake up call to go. We're all sick of the haze, sick of low bitterness IPAs, sick of the sweetness, and we're moving on. But in Russia, they're still getting really excited about that. And I'm very conscious of that on the channel. Like, we try not to ever dismiss any style as being boring and old, because we know that lots of people watching are either brand new to craft beer and it's new to them and exciting, or we're broadcasting into nations where it's a new trend.
Yeah, mate, I tell you what, this has just fired off some stuff in my brain. Wouldn't it be really exciting to be surprised by a new beer style coming from an unexpected country, in a corner of the world that we don't even sort of think about in terms of a beer hub? I'm not saying that's going to happen, but imagine if that happened.
I mean, it definitely it's happened twice
Yeah.
during our time in the channel. One is, I think, the Florida Vice really surprised us. We had no idea that Florida, outside of Cigar City, had a big brewing scene, and how concentrated that style of very heavily fruited lighter sour beers are, but also Kvike yeast.
Yeah, that's very true.
From the farmhouse breweries of Norway has come this yeast that is pretty quickly revolutionising what's possible in the brewing industry. You can churn out, using a Kvike yeast, you can churn out a New England IPA in 5 or 6 days.
Yeah, that is mad, isn't it? And when you think that that's an ancient organism that is from like a fucking farmhouse brewing scene in Norway, a Scandic country, and now it's as soon as it's escaped, it's been like, wow, this is a shortcut. We can now, halve our time or whatever it is, the scale. Just something that's so old can revolutionise a process. That's kind of crazy.
I mean, lots of innovation, particularly in today's world, isn't looking forward. It's actually looking back. It's looking back at old stuff that we've decided were rubbish. But actually, when you look at it with the technology we have today, it's great. So Kvike is, we've developed all of these genetically modified yeast to speed up fermentation and make it cleaner and all this kind of stuff. And all while, in a yeast bank in Norway has been sat this yeast that could have done it all for us.
Magic.
Exactly, yeah. And, you see the same, British hops at the moment is going through that exact phase. Like, we all look over to America because we want this big citric quality in our hop aromas. But actually, if you go back into the bank of all the seeds of all these hops that we've stopped using in the UK, for the simple reason they didn't have enough alpha acids. It was all about efficiency of getting as much bitterness and antiseptic quality into a beer with as few hops. So all those ones that weren't great at that, we stopped using, but we're bringing them back and we're growing them again. And a great example is Bullion. Bullion hops. Now, if you use them late rather than early in the boil, which is what we were doing beforehand, you suddenly get these amazing, big, bold, orange, like Chinook kind of flavours from a UK hop. So rather than having to invent new ones like we have with Jester, Olicana, Godiva, we can just use old ones like Bullion.
Yeah, that's cool as hell, man. I've just had another thought, which was like, do you think there are people out there that are hunting hops down? Like Indiana Jones type people that are going out in the wilds of South America and wherever else wild hops might be growing and trying to find new varieties? Or do you think it's just a matter of big companies now that are hybridizing to get to big companies and universities and stuff, like, to get new qualities out of hops?
I mean, it's all being done by the big companies. There's no Indiana Jones of hops out there, although possibly some hop varieties have been discovered in that way. I think there's definitely some Mexican hops maybe that have been recently discovered. I remember reading something and might be going into bigger production back up in the States. But, I mean, most new hops aren't discoveries of varieties we didn't know about. They're breeding programs of hops we already knew. So that's how most of the modern US hops have come about. They've been interbreeding Fuggle, Styrian Goldings, different hops like that, to create these super hops, mostly in the pursuit of ones that are resistant to diseases, so they're more reliable to grow. But increasingly, over the last 20, 25 years, it's been in the pursuit of bigger aromas and flavours and those essential and delicate oils that give us those flavours in beer.
Well, look, if no one's doing it, Johnny, I think me and you, we should get some plane tickets.
You've got the fashion sense for it.
Well, that's it. I've got the hat sense for
hats. It. Yeah.
I just need to get you a great hat, and we're going to hop on a flight to Mexico, and we're going to strike out. We're going to find our fortune in the wherever the high Sierras, or that they're not in Mexico, but somewhere. We're going to find some wild hops, or possibly weed, and just get stoned if we can't find any hops. But,
there you go, and at the very worst, we'll get a great video out of it.
That's it.
So moving on. I didn't have a specific comment that I wanted to flag, but quite a few people, including Caponet Olivier and Mr. Rougelot, referenced pastry sours as a trend. And we were interviewed by the founder of Untapped, Greg Avola, a couple of months ago, and we asked him about the trends that are happening that he sees on Untapped, and he said that sours, those kind of sours, were the big growth trend that he was seeing in the Untapped data. And it's definitely true that pastry sours have been a great way of welcoming people in. Next to New England IPA, these big, fruity, approachable, usually quite sweet beers have been, removing any barriers to entry for craft beer, which is usually bitterness. But we covered that, I think, last year when we included people like Pastore, who make really heavily fruited. I don't know whether they're quick sours at Pastore. I think they do have their own culture of souring yeast. But also Yonder, who we covered 2 years ago, have started doing the same thing with their raspberry ghosts and different sort of product lines based on that. So we saw that as a trend that happened last year and the year before, but it's definitely a trend that's going to continue this year, and it's probably the biggest trend that will happen this year, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, as we say, it started last year.
Great.
So guys, that's the end of our first podcast of the year. We'd love to hear your tips on what we think is going to be big this year, and in particular, we'd love those tips to come in recorded comments and questions to us. We haven't got any to read out this week because everyone's been either drunk or just following the terrible news, but we'd love to get more questions in from you guys, and we'll if you email them to craftbeerboys@gmail.com. We will play those on the podcast and then answer them then and there. If you want to ask us questions all the time, you can also join our Patreon at patreon.com/craftbeerchannel. For $1 a month, you get your name on the end of every video we do, and you get access to our private forum where me and Brad hang out along with currently about 150 of our Patreons, all chatting away about homebrew, trends in beer, absolute nonsense, food they're cooking. It's a really nice little community that's building there.
The community is basically kind of like this podcast where we can go off on any sort of tangent, but also it's a great place to just talk about serious beer chat.
Exactly, with zero judgment, which is the issue, I think, with a lot of these platforms, and we keep it light and keep it friendly, and we haven't had to sort of enforce that. That's just, it seems that nice people support what we do.
Exactly, mate.
And that makes us very happy indeed. But yes, this one has turned into an epic, so we'll end it there. Thanks so much for listening and joining us again in 2021. I'm not going to say things are going to get better, because every time I do, things get worse. Yeah. But I hope that you, on a personal level, your little corner of the world, you're doing okay. And we will see you next Wednesday for our next exciting upload. Yes, guys, be safe out there. Just be kind to each other. We've all got to coexist here. And don't be crazy, don't be racist, don't be horrible. Just be nice, be nice. We're all going through a world of weird times right now. So peace and love to the world. They'll be quoting that for centuries to come. Shut up, Johnny. It's Brad Evans, 2021. The Bubble Podcast is brought to you by the nerds behind YouTube's Craft Beer channel. Head to youtube.com/the Craft Beer channel to watch this week's video and over 400 more exciting episodes. If you love what we do, please do subscribe and even join our Patreon at patreon.com/craftbeerchannel. Love and beer.